Good evening. I don't know if this is on or there's no lights on it, so I'll speak up. My name is David Falcone. I'm with the law firm of Saul Ewing here on behalf of the applicant, SFR 10 LLC, who's the owner of the property, which is the subject of the application tonight. As was announced earlier, we are here seeking a variance to expand the nonconformity at the existing property, which presently has 12 units, 6 residential units located upstairs, and 6 small commercial retail units located downstairs. The applicant is seeking to convert the 6 units downstairs to 6 residential units. The units, since the property has been acquired, have been vacant. There's been efforts to let them with no success. There is interest in the residential market, and the applicant would like to expand them. The code would permit a 25% expansion. He's seeking an entire expansion, so we're here seeking that additional relief to go to 12 residential units. Of particular note, there is no direct access from the primary thoroughfare to this property. Instead, the access is taken from the residential side of the property. The property is on the far edge of the C1 district, immediately abutting residential zone, and the access itself is taken directly from the residential zone. I have 2 witnesses tonight. I did reach out to the solicitor before the hearing today. Our primary engineer is unfortunately has pneumonia and is unable to be here. We think he may have actually checked into the hospital. I have the owner of the property, and then I have the engineer's son, who is the property manager and who actually assisted on all of the drawings. So while we don't have our primary witness, we've got at least a bloodline, so we can hopefully get most of the information. So if there's no specific questions for me, I can quickly identify the exhibits that we've marked, and then I'll call my first witness, and that would be a representative for the owner of the property. So A1, which I've handed to you all, is a copy of our application. A2 is a copy of the deed showing the ownership of the property. A3 is an aerial and some facade photographs of the property just to orient the board. A4 is an excerpt of your zoning map showing the existing zoning of the property as C1, as well as the proximity to the residential zone. A5 are some zoning plans. A6 is a zoning permit denial, which brought us forth tonight. And A7 is a CV of the witness that I'll be calling from the engineer's office. So if there's no questions for me, I can get Mr. Rufo sworn and grab some testimony from him if it pleases the board. Thank you. You want to get sworn? Tony, can you state your affiliation with the ownership entity SFR 10 LLC?
I'm the owner of the property.
Great. And so I've got some exhibits marked there. You can see the one hanging out of the box there. So if you turn to exhibit A2, is that a copy of the deed for the property?
Yes,
And that evidence is the ownership with SFR 10. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And if you turn to exhibit A3, is that an aerial of the building, that first page?
Yes.
Staying on this exhibit for just a minute, can you please explain for the board, orient them? You heard me mention in my opening with respect to access to the property. So just using the exhibit as it's outlined and trying not to say here or there, but using more directions. Can you explain to the board how access is taken to this property, and then again, where that residential zone abuts your property and which is yours?
Okay. So if you're driving on Meeting House Road and you want to come into the property, you have to make a right or a left on 3rd Avenue, which is the residential street, and go down half a block, and then turn left into the property, and then you can park. Then to get out, you have to do the same thing. So it doesn't really have access onto the main road, the commercial road, which is Meeting House Road. And a lot of times, some of the problems would be people would just drive over the sidewalk and right out, because assuming it was a commercial use, and then instead of driving back down and then out Third Avenue.
And using Third Avenue as our guide here, to the bottom of the page, that's the residential zone. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And your property is looking at that white car that's parked in the parking lot on the exhibit. That's your property that faces kind of next to that white car. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the access to the property is to the right of that white car, kind of right above that Third Avenue designation.
That's correct. It's all the way down by the trees.
And you installed some barriers, is that correct, to stop cars from coming across the sidewalk to the left of your parking lot? You can kind of see some barriers there for parking.
Yes,
And that was to prohibit kind of unsafe passing between the property. Is that correct?
that's correct.
If we turn to the next page of Exhibit 3, that's a depiction of your property. Is that correct?
Yes,
And the residential units are located upstairs and they're occupied. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And the commercial retail units are located downstairs and they are not occupied.
That's correct.
The parking at the site is shown on this exhibit as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. If we turn to Exhibit A4 in your package.
Okay.
That's a portion of the township's zoning map. Is that correct?
Yes,
And it's designated on that map the C1 and the R2 areas. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And your property is designated as well with a star in the middle.
That's correct.
We turn to Exhibit A5. A5 is a plan of the project. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Showing the existing two-story building.
That's correct.
Can you describe for the board the existing conditions on site?
Yeah, there's 6 apartments on the second floor that are occupied, and the first floor is apparently it's 4 or 5 units because some of the stores have been combined. But right now they're all empty, mostly because one at a time that the users moved out.
Can you talk a little?
Oh, right now the first floor is entirely empty. One at a time, each of the uses just moved out, and we've tried to rent them, and there's been no demand.
And can you explain a little bit about kind of the size of those units and how you believe that that's impacting your ability to market them and be successful in that?
Yeah, the units are small, and it's on the edge of the residential area. So what's happened is the bigger shopping centers have gotten all the demand because a lot of the bigger boxes got in trouble. Amazon came along and put that it was overbuilt. They weren't needed. So they got in trouble in the bigger shopping centers with the bigger boxes. So they got chopped up into medium-sized boxes, and the medium-sized boxes got chopped up into smaller boxes. And this is what's happening in the larger shopping centers on the main roads. And so what those smaller stores were able to do is pull all the demand for stores of this size into the larger shopping centers. So you have dentists and nail salons and barber shops that would normally be in this center or on this location are now able to go into the shopping centers on the main location. So it's kind of a trickle down effect that there's now no demand for these units because of what happened with the whole Amazon effect, what happened in commercial real estate in general, where a lot of the bigger boxes went out because competing with Amazon was impossible for them. So then, nature fills a hole, and those boxes got used for other things. And now, what's happened is this would be commercially, this is the bottom of the barrel. So there's just no demand for this because you can just go right around the corner on the main road, and there's plenty of vacancy out there. But there is, fortunately, a lot of demand for residential.
And so upon acquiring the property, you explored the different possibilities. The property is zoned C1. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you've had discussions with the township to that end.
Yes.
And it's come to your attention that the existing residential uses on the property are in fact non-conforming.
That's correct.
And in order to expand that non-conformity, as part of your discussions with the township, you were told to seek a variance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you did seek, again, as part of the township suggestion, a right to know on some of the information on this property from the township. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And even after seeking that right to know, there was nothing in the file with respect to prior zoning relief or anything of that nature.
That's correct.
And so, with respect to the renovations of the property, are you proposing to knock any portion of the building down,
No,
expand the footprint in any way?
no,
You're simply trying to adjust the use of the units.
that's correct.
All work that you're proposing would be interior to the building.
That's correct.
Did you submit a zoning permit to convert the first floor commercial to residential?
Yes,
And that was ultimately denied. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And that's what we have marked as Exhibit A6.
That's correct.
Utilizing that zoning permit denial, you're seeking tonight a dimensional variance to increase the nonconformity. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Are there any physical circumstances that you believe make it difficult for the property to retain kind of a viable commercial unit? You've just discussed the Amazon effect, the size of the units. Anything else in that is a transitional area for the township?
Well, the property is under parked for commercial use because each store would only have one space, and each store would have an employee. So it's actually under parked for commercial. There wouldn't be enough for a successful business to be there. They wouldn't have enough parking even if they could use it. But residential, these will all one-bedroom units. There'd be plenty for each person to have their own parking, and 3 or 4. I forget the plan shows, but at least 3 or 4 for total of 18 total spots. So it'd be 6 guest parking spots. So it'd be over parked for residential, but it's way under parked for commercial use.
And then, are there any, in your experience as the owner of the property, are there any kind of fallout effects of the vacancy of these residential units that you've experienced as the owner?
So some of the tenants have complained at night of some drug trafficking going on in the center at night because it is a public lot because it's commercial, and the thought was they would rather have it be residential because then it would just be all private. There would be no reason for anyone to go in that lot. So anyway, our thinking.
Hold on
is-
1 second.
My thinking is, I adjust my thinking. My thought is that if it was a private lot, there's no reason, and there's people, and the units are occupied, then there's no reason for anyone to pull in there unless you live there or you're visiting somebody who lives there. And then the people tend to look out for the place themselves because that's where they all live. They know each other. When it's just empty stores, there's nobody down there looking out for anyone. It's just not a good situation.
And so, Tony, have you had any opportunity to speak with the current residents at the site?
Yes.
And is it your understanding as the owner of the building, based on those conversations, that there's no objection, nobody's raised any objection to you directly?
That's true.
And are you proposing to make any of the units that you're seeking to get tonight low-income housing?
No.
Section 8 housing?
No.
And you believe, based on your experience, that the conversion to residential is suitable for the property and won't create a detrimental public health, safety, or welfare?
Yes, I do.
So I have no additional questions for Mr. Rufo.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Pierce, attorney number 43852. We represent Upper Chichester Township, who appears in opposition to this variance request. Mr. Rufo, when did you acquire the property? What due diligence did you do to determine what it was owned and how it was properly used at the time? Okay, and you were told that it is in the C1.
I came here and I went over and asked them what I could do with it. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I came here and I asked them and they told me that I would need a variance.
And it was zone C1 at the time that you acquired the property?
Yes.
And the property has not changed zoning at all since the time that you've owned the property?
No.
Were the commercial portion of this property, was it occupied at the time?
Yes.
Were
So-
all the units occupied
No.
at the time?
Not all.
All right, how many of them were occupied?
2 units.
And there were a total of 3 or
There's-
6?
There's 4, but there's 6 stores. 2 of them were doubles.
And how many tenants did you have in that property at the time that you acquired it?
I only had 2 tenants on the first floor.
And how many businesses were operating out of there at the time?
2.
And it hasn't changed, or I'm sorry, you indicated that there were 2 tenants that are no longer there. What were the circumstances upon their leaving?
The hair salon just wasn't busy enough, and she wasn't. I think one of the reasons why I got the property was I don't think she was paying rent every month, and then she just kind of quit and gave up. And then the other was a tailor who retired.
Did you have active leases on those properties at the time that you acquired the property?
Yes, I did.
And how long were those leases to run?
I don't know.
What steps have you taken to market that property as a business property within the township?
We hired real estate professionals to market the property for rent.
Which
And-
real estate professionals did you hire?
Abby, get her last name. Abigail Monero, I believe her name is.
Okay.
And she's with. I forget the name of the thing, but I know the guy that she's partners with, and they do a lot down here. And I saw her sign around the corner on a couple properties, so I figured she'd be the right one.
Mhm.
So I called him, and he hooked me up with her
When did you do that?
about a year ago.
And to what extent?
A year ago. I'm sorry, about a year ago.
And what steps have you taken in addition to contacting this agent, or what steps did the agent take to market the property?
She put it on the internet for rent. She put a sign on the building for rent, and she reached out to the tenants that she works with, and to see if anybody had any demand, and called the other agents in the area who represent the tenants to see if anybody wanted it. And I don't know what I think she already reached out to a couple of business owners to see if they would be interested in expanding into it too.
And did she provide you with a call list or an activity list for the property for the marketing that she did?
No, she just would text us and email us what she was up to.
And what is the rent currently, or what was the ask for the rent for each of those individual commercial properties?
The one store facing the main street, we were asking 2,000. We would have taken 1,500. And the other store, the smaller stores, we asked for $600 a store.
And your testimony here tonight is that you have not been able to rent that. When did the last 2 tenants move out?
The hair salon stopped paying probably a year ago and moved out probably 8 or 9 months ago. I'm just guessing. I don't remember exactly when. I own a lot of real estate, so I can't remember. The tailor retired and moved out probably 9 months ago to a year ago.
Okay. And so in essence, you're telling me within the first 3 months of you owning the property that these tenants moved out.
I think it's more like 6. So I probably own the property for more like 18 probably.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Are all the residential properties or units rented out?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Did you increase your rents?
A little bit.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. At the time, at the present, are all 6, I believe it's 6 upstairs units, they're all rented,
They're all rented.
and they're all rent. Nobody owns any of them units.
No, it's all one property. It's not.
It's one property and there's 6 rental units
Yes.
up top.
Falcone, any more witnesses on behalf of the application? Yes, yep, please, yes.
Okay,
Swear in the witness and then,
So just a follow-up again from Mr. Rufo based on some of the
Oh, I
questions you
see,
had.
okay.
Is that okay?
yes, sir.
So Tony, one of the questions I want to ask based on some of the questions we got from the township and from the board, which is vacancy at the property and success in re-renting. During your ownership, were any of the 6 residential units, did they ever go vacant?
Yes.
And you immediately tried to re-rent those units?
Well, we would paint, put a new carpet, and did a little bit of remodel, and then we put them up for rent
And how quickly did they rent?
right away.
You found that the residential demand was great.
Yes, very strong.
And one of the questions that we heard from Mr. Pierce earlier was with respect to you engaging commercial brokers to lease your space.
That's correct.
And-
I would just to clarify, I would rather rent it commercially. I don't want to. It's expensive to turn commercial space into apartments, but it's not my opinion that matters. It's the people of Upper Chichester that matter, and that's where they've spoken. They don't want to rent it commercially, but they want it residentially just by the demand. So that's what leads me here. It's if I could rent it commercially, that'd be a lot easier. There's a hair salon there. It's a whole hair salon. There's a a tailor shop there. Just if I could get people to take the shops, that'd be better for me. And commercial rents are just as high, if not higher, especially the front one, than the residential rents. So this is costing me money, but that's where the demand is. That's what the people of Upper Chichester want. So that's why we're here.
In the period that you engaged, and I believe you said you engaged the commercial broker pretty quickly after you acquired the property, and you stayed in pretty regular contact with that broker to garner or to understand the demand that was in the community.
Yes, that's correct.
During that time, you've had no takers on the space.
We had one person call, one that thought about a smoke shop. There was a smoke shop across the street, and they decided not to.
No additional questions for Mr. Yes, sir. So I was going to get some of that from my next witness, but I will ask Mr. Rufo as well. So one of the things the board must consider, Tony, is one, whether or not you've created this hardship on your own. So after acquiring the property, did you intentionally evict tenants to create a vacancy at the site?
No.
Did you seek a rezoning or during your ownership participate in having the property rezoned to commercial?
I don't see
It
how.
was zoned C1 when you
Yeah,
acquired the property.
That's correct.
Based on your experience in owning commercial real estate, you say you own a lot of real estate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You own retail properties.
Yes.
You own residential properties.
Yes.
So you have expertise in this area.
Yes.
And based on that expertise, do you believe that? Let me strike that. You're familiar with obviously the location of this property.
Yes.
You visited the property.
Yes.
You visited the surrounding areas as well.
Yes.
And during both your due diligence as well as your ownership, you've come to familiarize yourself with the surrounding neighborhood for this property.
Yes.
You've offered testimony tonight that you're aware of commercial uses that abut this property as well as residential uses that abut this property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you believe that seeking a dimensional variance to convert and expand the nonconformity from the 6 current residential uses to 12 residential uses will have a detrimental impact on the public health, safety, or welfare?
Absolutely not.
Now, one of the other things this board must consider is will there be a detrimental increase or impact on the traffic generated from this site or on the services that this township must provide to its residents? So looking first at traffic, do you believe that moving from a property which is zoned for commercial uses to zoned for resident or use for residential uses will have a detrimental increase in traffic?
I believe that it's commonly understood and accepted that residential is less traffic than commercial use.
And so that's supported by, and your understanding that there will be less parking spots required by code for residential uses as opposed to commercial uses.
That's correct.
And that's a result of the traffic that's generally generated and those that will come to visit the property.
That's correct.
Do you believe that the relief you're seeking tonight is the minimum necessary to satisfy your request, which is to fill this space and to eliminate the vacancy on your property.
Yes.
I'd like to call my next witness if there's no specific questions. Mr. Pierce, any follow-up for Mr. Rufo? The board has no follow-up. I can call my next witness. Thank you.
Christopher Christakis. Christakis. Yeah, yes.
Mr. Kostopoulos, can I call you Chris?
Yes.
And you've stated your name. You've been sworn, so you're under oath, and all the testimony you're going to give tonight will be sworn testimony. You understand that?
Absolutely. Yes.
We have marked as exhibit C7 or A7 a copy of your CV. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Mhm.
And is that an accurate depiction of your professional and educational background?
It is. Yes.
Can you describe for the board just a little bit about your professional background and, I'm sorry, who you're employed by?
Sure. So I have been a project manager for the Christakis company for 13 years since graduating from Drexel University. I studied entrepreneurship, so I'm not an engineer like my father is, but I've been working under him doing code review, doing project management, generating the plan that we're looking at here, the site plan. That's, my work. That cover what you need?
A little bit. So I
Okay.
want to go a little more, and just for the board, because you're not an engineer. So I want the board to understand your involvement in this project and the plans that we've submitted. So
Yeah.
can you explain to the board exactly kind of what your job entails as a project manager and what input you put into the plans that are submitted, if you actually do the plans and then submit them to your father for review? If they could just understand your involvement, and then specifically with respect to this project, how familiar you are with the plans and the work that's being done.
Yeah. So we work, it's a two-man crew. It's me and my dad. So we both work together to survey the property and then generate these drawings based off of the zoning code for that district. Basically, as a project manager, my job is to work with the property owner and any other parties, contractors, anyone else who's involved in utility companies, to make sure that the project runs smoothly. In this case here, we're in the planning phase. It's really about looking at the property, seeing what the existing conditions are, what the zoning district is, and what that allows for, and generating the zoning facts, listing them so that they're clear for everyone for permitting processes or purposes, and kind of walking the property owner through that process from our experience.
And you've offered testimony in front of boards in the past. Is that correct?
I have. Yes, I've done many zoning hearing boards. This is my first with any type of opposition, though. So, but yes, I've presented before head of zoning boards for different properties being rezoned and everything. Yep.
Well, there'll be more with opposition. I can promise.
Absolutely.
You're familiar with the property. You're familiar with these plans, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
If we flip to Exhibit A5,
Mhm.
That's one of your plans. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
And can you describe for the board the work you've done here? And you prepared this plan. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
And can you explain to the board exactly what this plan is showing us? And I see you have your zoning facts there, and we're going to get into some of those things in a minute here. But just explain generally what's shown on this plan.
Yeah, so it shows the existing building as it is, right now currently, and you can see the location of it based upon the meets and bounds set out in the deed for the property. It shows basically how it's accessed from 3rd Avenue, the existing parking spaces that are there, kind of the property line setbacks as well from the building to the property lines. In terms of the zoning facts, I mean, those are showing basically what's required, what's existing, and whether or not that conforms or does not conform. is there anything else?
Yep,
Okay.
That's great. And you're aware that the, yes, sir.
Are you going to be asking Mr. Christakis for an opinion?
I'm not.
No, okay, very good, thank you.
I'm not sure Mr. Christopher is kind of able to give an engineering opinion on it. I want him to walk through some of the zoning criteria, the existing nonconformities.
Just simply reciting the facts as he found them?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So Chris, looking at exhibit A5,
Mhm.
The size of the property, can you
Yeah.
cite that for
So
the board?
so the size of the property, it's 16,000 square feet. The total size of the property, which is typically small for a commercial property. Yeah, I mean, it's,
Understood. And so you're aware that the project is being proposed to convert those 6 retail units to residential units. One of the items that we know is that the property is currently underparked for its current use. Is that shown on your zoning fact table?
it is, yes.
And
So
what is the requirement per code for the existing uses on site?
yeah, so as currently constituted, the property requires 30 parking spaces, 12 for the residential spaces, and 18 for the commercial spaces. Currently, the property only has 18 parking spaces.
And I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
had
that's fine.
stepped over. What would be the required number of parking spaces
30 parking spaces total.
would
Yeah.
be required? And we
We have
currently
18 currently. Yep,
So that's an existing non-conforming.
that is correct. Yep.
And have you done an analysis to determine how many parking spaces would be required if all of the units were residential?
Yes.
And what's the answer to that question?
So if the entire property were residential, used for residential, we would be required 24 total parking spaces. So it would be a
24.
reduction of 6 parking spaces from what is currently required as a mixed-use commercial property.
And is the applicant proposing any additional parking?
No, we actually don't. We're currently existing non-conforming on the impervious coverage, it would not be possible, and we are not proposing to do any additional parking there.
But it's your testimony that should the board see to grant the variance tonight, the nonconformity would be reduced as a result of the change in the use. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
And you mentioned impervious. You got ahead of me.
Yeah,
the-
I apologize.
The existing impervious coverage at the site is what?
Yeah, so the property is currently permitted 75% impervious coverage, which would be based off the size of the property, approximately 12,000 square feet. And currently, the property utilizes 15,520 square feet, which is existing non-conforming. It's over that 75% currently.
Any change being proposed to the impervious coverage as a result of this application?
No, we're not proposing any changes to the existing or potential impervious coverage. We're not disturbing any new land or anything like that. Yep.
There's another area of nonconformity that you're aware of. Is that correct?
Yes.
At the rear yard?
That is another one. So basically, currently the requirement for that property is a 35-foot setback to the rear yard. And currently we only have a 6-foot setback behind the building to the rear yard of the property.
Are you proposing to change in any way that setback?
No, we're not.
I have no additional questions for this witness. Thank you. No, sir.
I would call William Gavin, please, first.
Gavin.
Mr. Gavin, would you please state your position with the Township of Upper Chichester?
Yes, I'm the License and Inspections Director.
And are you familiar with the property that's in question here tonight, specifically 2419 3rd Avenue?
Yes,
And your familiarity is because you've been to the property itself?
yes,
All right. And did you have an opportunity to look through the files on this particular property prior to coming here tonight?
I have.
Mr. Gavin, did you have an opportunity to hear the testimony of Mr. Rufo?
Yes,
At the time, Mr. Rufo testified that he had had various changes in tenants. Is that correct?
that is.
Are you aware of any inspections that were done as a result of those changes in tenants by the Township of Upper Chichester?
No, only for the initial inspection for the sale of the property.
And would a new use and occupancy certificate be required for new tenants coming into the building?
Yes, it
Did that occur to the best of your knowledge?
will. No, it did not.
Did you participate in any inspections when those new tenants came in?
I have not.
Has the township, to the best of your knowledge, received any applications for new use and occupancy certificates as a result in that change in tenancy?
No, we have not.
Thank you. I have no other questions, Mr. Gavin.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board, Mr. Gavin? My next witness would be Mr. Brian Seidel, please. I hope not. I did just see him there a minute ago.
Sure. For the record, Brian Seidel, Township Planner. Last name is spelled Seidel. I do.
Thank you, Mr. Seidel. Would you please state what your position is with the township?
Sure. Position with the township is the appointed township planner.
And how long have you been in that position?
Several years, 4 years, I believe.
Okay. And as part of that job as a township planner, do you review the various items that come before not only the zoning hearing board, but the planning commission as well as the board of commissioners?
Yes, the development applications.
Yes.
Yes,
And are you familiar with the particular property that we have before us today?
I am.
And can you tell me what that property is zoned?
The property is zoned the C1 Commercial 1 zoning district.
And is that particular area part of what your future plans or what the township's future plans envision for that particular area?
That property is included within the what's been identified as the Boothwyn Town Center and is included within the Boothwyn Town Center vision plan that was recently adopted by the commissioners.
And did you bring copies of that plan for the board?
I brought a summary of that plan. Yes.
Right. Okay. Can we hand those out, please? We'll have this as Township Exhibit 1, please. Township 1, yes. And Mr. Saito, if you can just briefly tell us what a vision plan is or how it relates to this particular property and the district that's being proposed in the township.
Sure. The vision plan and the summary that I handed out to you, the total plan was approximately, I believe, 70 pages in length. So what I've provided and highlighted are what I consider to be the key components of this plan as it applies to this application. The vision plan is basically a comprehensive plan for the area. It's the guiding principles that the township and the public has determined is the appropriate course of action or way the development should evolve within this area and this community.
And when you say the public has spoken about that, can you explain to the board a little bit of the process that took place in coming about with that?
Sure. So the process took about 2.5, 3 years in total. There was paid professionals. There was input from the township professionals, from the township staff. But more importantly, we went out to the community through the heart and soul process. We held public meetings. We conducted community surveys to gauge what the community was looking for as part of these.
And as part of what the community was looking for as part of the plan, you've had the opportunity to review the application that's before the zoning hearing board related to this property.
That's correct.
And based on your review of the requested variances, would this property, should the variance be granted, fit within the vision that the community has provided for this particular piece of property?
No, I don't believe it does.
And why is that?
The concept of full apartment buildings were not specifically identified or contemplated as being appropriate for the area. What is contemplated throughout the plan and what this is really hinged upon, and I believe it's identified in page 1 on the introduction, is attracting economic development, expanding businesses, creating a town center with mixed uses. So there was a concept of residential that was discussed. However, the residential that was desired for the area would only be associated with commercial buildings and in mixed use buildings, specifically on page 31 of the report, where it says allows for mixed uses, primarily first floor commercial with residential above. So the property as it exists today with residential above and first floor commercial or retail uses is what the community has identified would be appropriate for use in that area.
And I think you indicated, and I didn't mean to gloss over it, that the Board of Commissioners adopted this plan back in February of 2022. Is that right?
That's correct.
And this plan has been available for review and use by anybody that came into the township requesting the same. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I believe looking today, it's actually on the homepage of the township webpage.
So this particular piece of property in question, the 2419 3rd Avenue, actually sits almost in the middle of this particular envisioned district. Is that right?
Generally, it's in the overall the center of the entire area. Correct. More importantly, the property is within the what's considered or identified as the downtown core of this community.
And as your understanding is, the township is committed to building up of this downtown neighborhood district to a certain level over the next coming years by providing various infrastructure upgrades, soliciting commercial aspects of the properties, and creating essentially a walkable downtown area. Is that correct?
Correct.
For layman's terms, basically.
Correct. By encouraging economic development and encouraging commercial development in the area.
So and this was, again, I don't mean to beat the dead horse from that. This was a plan that's been available for review for anybody that came in before purchasing property in that area. And I think I interrupted you. You started to tell me about some of the other aspects of this particular summary that would be applicable to this particular property.
Just a few high points where I indicated that property is located within the downtown core. Again, supporting economic development, expanding business opportunities. It's also identified that the property is included what are considered catalyst projects, which is identified as a town center mixed use zoning. So to encourage a mix of uses, not just residential. And again, looking at the future land use map identifies the subject property as a mixed use property.
And obviously, and I don't mean to state the obvious, but a totally residential is not a mixed-use property by definition. I don't have any other questions at this time.
What, this document called, promote new compatible infill housing? Not familiar with that phrase.
Sure. Can you tell me what you're reading from, what page of this packet?
Pages are, page 26 says opportunity concepts, context zones, and then under traditional neighborhood residential, protect existing housing, promote new compatible infill housing, and improve sidewalks, etc.
Correct. So that the context zone is for a different context zone. That is the residential context zone that's discussed here. What I've highlighted above that is the downtown core. That is the that is the context zone of where this property is located. But regarding traditional neighborhood residential, it does indicate protect existing housing, promote new compatible infill housing, provide home improvement assistance. That is basically a key component of this plan was neighborhood preservation. They've identified, the plan identifies the downtown core as an appropriate location generally for redevelopment and for new development opportunities. However, the study area does encompass a larger residential area, primarily single-family detached dwellings. And that traditional neighborhood residential topic on page 26 that we've discussed identifies preserving that character.
So that would not be this zone, or that's an adjacent zone?
That would be in an adjacent zone.
Okay. So that doesn't apply to this zone here?
It doesn't apply to this zone specifically. However, a key component of the plan is to protect the existing residential development and the existing residents in the area.
What is infill housing? What is that? What does that mean?
Infill housing would be, let's say, for example, there's a, lack of specificity here. If zoning would permit a 1 acre building lot, or I'm sorry, a half-acre building lot, and there's a 1 acre lot within the community, that could be subdivided and you could provide infill housing within that area or on a separate lot.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone?
I do have some questions. Mr. Seidel, so just to be clear on your expertise here, you're the township's planner. Are you employed by the township as a consultant or an employee of the township?
I am a consultant.
You work outside of this township as well?
I do.
And you've performed this type of analysis and rezoning in other townships as well?
I have. Since I basically go through my credentials quickly, I hold a Bachelor of Science in Landscape Architecture from Temple University. I've been working in the field of land use planning, landscape architecture since 1997. I'm certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is a national certification. I'm also licensed by the state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Maryland as a landscape architect. I've testified in front of numerous boards and commissions throughout Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Maryland. Applications before municipalities, on behalf of municipalities, as well as private development.
That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. So if I look at page 27 on your plan, which is the downtown core, the neighborhood residential, you identify all of your context zones for this proposed town center vision plan. Are you able to identify the subject property exactly where it's located in the downtown core?
Sure. Looking at this map, it's actually on the, it would be on the lower corner of the property, basically at the boundary between the neighborhood residential and the downtown core. The 3rd Avenue is essentially the boundary line between that area.
And so some of the testimony we got a little bit earlier, I just want to make sure we're clear. We heard this property sits in the middle of the downtown core, and that's not necessarily correct, is it? It's absolutely on the far corner of the downtown core zone, immediately abutting the residential. Is that correct?
To be clear, what I had indicated is the study area. It's generally central to the study area, which is bounded by the creeks on either side, 95 to the south, and the rail line. to
So
the north.
my question to you though, and I think it's important because we're going to get into some additional questions, but this proposed property, as we had testified earlier, is zoned presently C1. You're aware of that?
Yes,
And it's immediately adjacent, abutting a residential zone. You're aware of that as well.
correct.
And as a part of this vision plan, you've assigned a very similar zoning designation. You've placed it in a downtown core, correct?
To clarify, this is not a zoning designation as the downtown core,
But
but is a planning area.
You've placed it in a planning area that you've identified as downtown core that is immediately abutting and adjacent to a neighborhood residential district
Residential district, yes.
that you call neighborhood residential. You call it traditional neighborhood residential.
In the context zone, yes.
Okay. So I will ask you in your planning expertise, when a property, commercial, residential, whatever the use might be, sits vacant for a period of time, is that indicative of the present need for a use of that type in that zoning?
I don't based on the testimony that I heard, I'm not sure.
That's not. So the question is, you are a professional planner.
Correct.
You analyze uses and zones and zoning designations within various municipal zoning codes. Is that correct?
Yes,
And as part of your occupation and your job here for this township, you're evaluating whether this designated area is appropriately zoned and used to meet the Boothwyn Town Center vision. Is that correct?
yes.
So I'm asking for, in a sense, a bit of expert testimony based on your credentials. When evaluating existing uses within any municipality, any zoning district, does occupancy impact your determination as to whether or not a use is a viable use? Do you evaluate how long properties are vacant, what the surrounding vacancies are, what the surrounding uses are? Do you take all of that into consideration when evaluating the overall success of a property, of a zoning district, of any of that? Do you include all of that data in your analysis?
We certainly look at vacancy and surrounding uses, yes.
And not just for specific properties, but you evaluate an entire area. And so I'd like to respond to that objection.
Yeah, in his opinion, he's given opinions. He's not considered an expert witness. I agree.
I just want to make that clear. Just wanted to note that.
Absolutely.
He just asked him for an expert. He hasn't been offered.
Correct.
I'm asking for only his opinion for his qualifications that he outlined. Whether the board wants to entertain it in whatever fashion they would like, that's
Yeah.
the board's deference.
Yeah, you can ask, but he's not considered an expert witness.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood. So then, Mr. Seidel, one of the additional questions you were asked dealt with the timing around this vision plan. Is that correct? When it was commenced?
Correct.
And can you refresh my recollection as to when? Was it 2 years, 2.5 years? I don't remember exactly.
I believe it was, I would say roughly 2.5 to 3 years before its adoption in February of 2022.
And you heard the testimony tonight from Mr. Rufo that he acquired the property approximately 18 months ago, so well after this vision plan was commenced.
That was the testimony, yes.
And when you're
And
evaluating,
I'm sorry to clarify, no, the testimony was that he acquired the property 18 months ago. He did not acquire the property after, or yes, he acquired it after it commenced.
correct. So
Okay,
it commenced 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Mr. Rufo acquired the property after you had commenced the vision plan analysis. So it's your understanding that a reasonable purchaser would know this was out there and would do their due diligence and know there's a vision plan being prepared that would impact the potential purchase property.
It was made public, yes.
And so when a property owner acquires a piece of property that's vacant, in your experience, do they seek to rent it?
I'm sorry, the testimony was that it was not vacant when it was acquired, correct?
It was partially vacant. So, but that's not my question. A property that becomes vacant is, in your experience, does an owner then seek to let it?
Let it mean find a tenant for it.
Yes.
Yes,
And you heard the testimony tonight that Mr. Rufo engaged a professional real estate agent to lease his property. Is that correct? I don't think that was the name that he gave.
It was a real estate person. Correct.
Well, so no, wait a second. So I don't want to color the record here.
Yeah.
Mr. Rufo offered testimony that he engaged a professional real estate agent. If Mr. Pierce objects to that, then we can certainly have an objection about that. But the testimony is efforts were made to relet the premises. That was testimony that was given. I didn't hear any cross-examination on that.
Sure, that's fine.
So the question I asked was, when a property becomes vacant, it's considered appropriate to try and lease that space. And in your experience, do you hire a professional to lease the space?
my experience, yes, generally.
And that would be an appropriate step to take to attempt to lease a property that's vacant. Is it your experience in planning that vacancy can lead to additional crime, loitering, general degradation of the property when properties sit vacant for an extended period of time?
Yeah, that's out of the scope actually of what he's testifying, what his expertise is.
So I would just ask the board to consider whether or not a planner, when evaluating, so we're seeing a total rezone or a revision of this property and this area. And I'm trying to get from this witness who put this together, whether they considered crime levels, vacancy levels, and all of the things that ultimately lead to a new vision for a zoning plan, or if it's simply, we just want to change the zone. I'm offering, my witness and owner has offered testimony that this property sat vacant for almost a year. And as a result, there's been an increase in crime and activity at the property. What I'm asking from this witness is, when evaluating this entire area, did the township, did the planners consider pockets of vacancy, increase in crime when creating these specific zones? Because I think it's relevant to the thought process around picking this area in this township to create a new vision plan. If it was simply, we want to create a town center, we think we have good, vibrant life here, and we want to give more flexibility for development, that's one thing. If it's, we see a problem in this area, and this is one of the properties that we considered, and we're addressing that need. I'd like to know that, because
Whether or not his testimony is impactful to the board in connection with your inability to rent.
No testimony that there is was speculation that perhaps he spoke to a tenant, indicated that they've seen more activity in the parking lot. No corroboration, nothing. Let it go at that point, because it didn't have any bearing on anything. So again, we're going far afield from what the direct testimony is of Mr. Sardelli.
I'm happy to move off of this line of
Yeah,
questioning.
consider how relevant it is that they have a zone there. That's not the zoning.
Understood.
The zoning is the zoning.
Understood. So then just one more question I'll have. You mentioned that this was brought to the community and that the community by and large wanted to see this plan move forward. That was the desire of the community. That was your specific testimony.
That's correct.
At any point, was this application brought to the community as a whole to seek the community's feedback on whether or not this property should be allowed to use 12 residential units?
The plan was adopted February of 2022. This application was brought forward approximately a year later.
So all of the testimony that you offered tonight was based on feedback that predated this owner's ownership of the property.
At least this application, yes.
And at no point were you re-engaged by the township to analyze whether this application would have any positive or negative impact on your vision plan.
No, we did not. I was not tasked with identifying specific positive or negative aspects of this application.
And since this application was submitted and notices were sent to over 100 individuals in this township, did you as the township planner receive any direct feedback as to whether or not, from neighbors, as to whether or not they support or oppose this specific application?
I have not been approached. No.
I have no additional questions for this witness.
Yes, no objections from either. Okay, everything's been entered.
Argument? Or are you going to go out to the audience?
gonna go out
Oh,
to the
Sorry,
audience.
excuse me.
Anyone in the audience for or against this application would like to be made a party, or you could just, but yes, lady in the first row first.
That's
Yes,
second
right
row.
there, second row. Do you want to be sworn in and made party? Sure.
Hi. I came here tonight with really just, oh, okay. Kimberly Flint, Flint, 2621 Fifth Avenue. Sure. I came, I'm just a person, a resident, I'm not an ex. 500 feet.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I came here with just literally one question and one comment, and now my head's exploding. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard from some of my neighbors that 3rd Street is going to be used as a thoroughfare for this property for the residents. Okay, well, that's unacceptable. It doesn't impact me, but it impacts my neighbors back here. I would be pissed if this was happening on my street. We have little kids in this neighborhood. And this part of Upper Chichester, this part of Meeting House and that side of Meeting House, I'm really getting really proud of. I was really happy about this vision project. Very happy. And I'm telling you, I'm almost in tears because these people, their street is going to be used by 12, 24 more cars a day coming in and out. And these aren't busy streets. These are little side streets. It's not right. It's not fair for the amount of taxes we pay. Number one, you're going to endanger lives. It's bad. It's bad.
Very much.
Oh, wait, I have
Oh,
one
I'm
more
sorry.
question, please. Is this the residents that maybe you might put in here, are they going to be residents or is this Section 8 or HUD? None.
It's illegal to stop it. Oh, boy, please. Everything has to go on the record.
I'm listening.
That's been asked and answered. They said under their direct testimony that it was not going to be, they had no present intention of making it Section 8.
Okay, I guess I'll let my neighbors talk. Oh, I'm sure they do, yes.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Stamp, 1607 Meeting House Road. I am right across the street from the property. So I'm gonna swear in. Yeah. So I live right next to property that's being talked about today. I am on the corner of 3rd Avenue and Meeting House. My wife and I have been there 30 years. Never had an issue with the previous owner. Known him for a very, very long time. Kept his place clean and up to code, I assume. Nobody ever came over and asked us anything of our opinion about this. So, I mean, if they said they talked to the residents, I'm right across the street. I'm out in my yard multiple days. The property across the street from us on, I guess that would be the north side of Meeting House Road, has commercial properties that are doing very well right there with residents above. The property that the commercial residents that were on that in that area were there for many years without issues. I believe there used to be that every one of those stores was rented for multiple years until the new gentleman purchased the property. Not that he has anything to do with it, or I don't know that, but I'm just telling you from experience. The traffic and the accident rate that is on that road between 3rd and Meeting House, there was 8 accidents this year, 2 in the same day. So adding more traffic to that area is ludicrous because it's just going to happen more and more. The fact that there is a residential community there that's pretty tight. A lot of the neighbors that are there are close. We talk to each other. We have kids. We have grandkids that play out there. So, in my opinion, this would not, at no means, help the neighborhood or the traffic situation there. It would only hinder it. Like I said, I've been there for 30 years. I've never had a problem with the owner across the street because everything was done up to par. His people were polite. The commercial residents were polite. We never had an issue. So I do have an issue with this property being zoned all residential. That's all I have. No, I have no issue with the current. No issue at all. Just the fact that we want to turn it all residential.
I do, yes. Mr. Stampy was just here. I'm next door neighbor. Sure, if it helps. Sure, Lou, L-L-E-W, last name Worley, W-E-R-L-E-Y. L-E-Y. Okay, so first of all, thank you for letting us be a part of this proceeding. I'm very interested in all the information has been extremely helpful, and I think in a lot of cases helps our cause as the residents within the township. First and foremost, the project director that was going through this. It doesn't make sense to me as a resident that if this is going to be the centerpiece of what we're trying to do as the town clearly state, we're going to try for commercial space on the first floor to bring business into the area. Turn our neighborhood into more of a thriving situation. So if we're taking away that sends the wrong message to the neighborhood. And call for the entirety of the downtown area of Chichester Avenue to be that process. And that's what we're striving to be as a neighborhood. Why would we take that space away? Parking is extremely an issue. Family has 2 vehicles. Putting 12 units in, 12 times 2 is 24. There's only space for 18. Where are those other 6 cars going to park? There'll be restrictions on how many cars per unit. Is that going to be enforced? Wasn't going to bring drugs into the fold. What is there proof of this drug nuisance that has been there? Surveillance video. Has that been presented to either the township or the resident that's in there? Also, are there going to be additional changes to the property itself? Like I mentioned, surveillance. Is there going to be something that's going to be taken care of? Now, the owner has stated that they are not putting Section 8 housing in there. How long until they can apply to have Section 8 housing in there? It doesn't matter. So if it is given to that, they can never apply to have Section 8 housing there in that space. Okay, so what kind of timing would it be to be able to apply for that? Are we talking in 6 months, years?
Whenever they want.
So they can do it the next day.
Yes.
So that so
God
clearly
bless.
stating their intention is they won't have it, but the day that this would be granted potentially. Apply for it.
Federal right.
Okay, and that's fair. Just out of curiosity, is it our right to know what the rent was for the commercial space on the prior tenants?
Only if they'll tell you.
What it was prior to? So they told us what it is currently. What was it before?
You had the opportunity to cross-examine the witness.
Is that a fair? I'm asking. Is that a fair line of questioning?
It would have been, yes.
So
But
I'd like to
the-
know. Is that something we could be privy to?
But the applicant has rested.
Okay. Okay. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a resident, I'm a concerned resident, so I'm asking questions. And then as far as I'm very concerned that the marketing that was done by the tenant to try and get folks into the commercial space doesn't even know the legal name of the person that was working for them and representing all this space. That's a major concern to me, because then that doesn't show that there was any kind of effort to have those businesses. And as my neighbor stated, across the street, there is a full line of commercial businesses that are fully occupied. Even behind on the other side of Meeting House on 3rd Ave, there's a salon back there. There's other businesses. There's the carpet place that's been there forever. There's a fish shop next door. There's thriving businesses. So for the claim to be that they can't get businesses, it doesn't seem to me that they're trying very hard. Sorry, I'm just trying to make sure I got all my notes
No,
here.
take your time.
Yeah, just to the township. And again, I want to make sure that we're putting these feelers out there. If we're taking that space away, I can't stress that enough. I think it's extending the extreme wrong message that other potential buyers could come in and do this time, essentially shut down what the council is trying. And I, as a resident, was very excited to see what could be coming. The plans are fantastic. I was very skeptical at the beginning of it, but once the plans came out, I know that the traffic is a mess. I've heard that as that progresses, there's been plans in place. Talking to Ed Rakowski, our commissioner, sounds like there's possibilities of either speed bumps or one-way streets going one direction on the even numbered streets and odd numbered streets going the other direction to limit some of the traffic. As we know, Wawa's been great from a financial for the township, but obviously it's causing other issues from McKay to Osceola, even down to the other number streets, all the way down to Central Ave and to the creek. It's a lot of financial issues. And having young children, there's a lot of young children, not just mine, in the area. I'd hate to see that safety compromised at all with up to however many cars there are for 12 additional units going on Third Ave, which is already a tight street as it is. That was all I had. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for standing up.
Anyone else for or against this application? Yes. Can you grab the mic?
I think the question was how many people can occupy a one bedroom? Not a whole. Is why I thought it was
Was that your question? You wanted to know how many people can?
Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied with the answer? Okay, thank you.
In response to a couple of things that we've heard tonight, I think it's important to clarify the record. This applicant has owned the property for approximately 18 months. During that ownership, these units have become vacant. Mr. Rufo engaged Abigail Monero, a licensed real estate agent with Capital Commercial Real Estate Group. I'm happy to present her license number, but I don't know if that's appropriate for the record. She's an active broker in this community, in this township, in this corridor for residential uses. I think it's appropriate to understand that Mr. Rufo has a long history of owning real estate, and that any real estate owner, the appropriate steps when a property falls vacant is to engage a professional and seek to let the space. It's not Mr. Rufo's fault. It's not anybody's fault that this space did not rent. It's simply a fact. Using some of the exhibits that we've circulated tonight and handed to this board, I would ask the board to consider carefully. This is a uniquely situated property immediately adjacent to a residential unit that has no direct access to the primary commercial thoroughfare. Instead, this property has a singular access point onto a residential property. It also directly faces the residential neighborhood and not the commercial thoroughfare. This property is unique. It's distinct from a common commercial corridor. It's ripe for a variance. There are unique circumstances that apply to this property that are different from other properties. It's a result of those unique circumstances that this variance is being sought. It's presently used in a fashion which the planner testified they'd like to see used, which is residential upstairs and commercial downstairs. However, after appropriate and professional efforts to re-let this space, there's been no activity. And as a result, the property has sat vacant for close to a year, 9 months, 10 months. And this owner has direct information as the owner of the property that there's increased activity at this site. There is no better testimony than from the owner of the property who deals with this space more frequently than anybody else in this room. This owner testified that he reached out to the residents of the building to make it clear. I know one direct neighbor, and I think that's appropriate to say he never spoke to him, but I want to make sure that Mr. Rufo's testimony was clear. He spoke to the 6 residents at the space to see whether there was objection from those folks to this variance, and there was none. They're the residents of this community. Testimony tonight is simply that the existing nonconformity be expanded. The code would allow 25%. We're asking for more than that. There is direct testimony from Mr. Rufo and from his project manager that the required parking on this site for a mixed use is 30 spaces, which is directly indicative of the amount of traffic commercial requires and generates as opposed to residential. Mr. Rufo absolutely appreciates that this is a property that exits directly onto a residential street. What Mr. Rufo is proposing will generate less traffic than a fully occupied commercial building. Again, it's a uniquely situated property, which is faced on a residential neighborhood. He is attempting to align this property in use and occupancy with its most appropriate and direct neighbor. That's the testimony this evening. It is not in response to an overall plan. Mr. Rufo's acquisition of this property, when he did, it's irrelevant when compared to when the overall rezone plan was put forth. The property is zoned what it is zoned today, and that is C1. It is abutted by what it is abutted today, and that's residential. Mr. Rufo did not seek vacancy. He did not drive vacancy. The testimony this evening was that he sought $600 for the smaller residential units and was asking $2,000 for the combined residential units, which would be 2 units together. So, but also offered testimony he would accept $1,500, which would be $750 per unit space. So there were some units he was seeking $600 for a commercial unit per month. Others he was asking and ultimately would have accepted $1,500. That was the direction that was given his broker. So a lot of the concerns that were raised tonight from the neighbors were specifically addressed during testimony. We'd ask the board to look carefully at this property and its unique situation when considering the request for a variance. Thank you.
Variance, right?
It's a dimensional variance, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Brenton. I would, just very briefly, just a couple of items. I'm not going to go through the requirements or the burden of proof for the request for a variance. It's not the township's burden to show that it can't be. It is the applicant's burden to show that it must be granted in order to have fundamental fairness. That's what we're dealing with. A couple of points on this particular issue is we heard some testimony, and I'm still not quite sure what the Amazon effect is or how it impacts that property. But as council has clearly indicated, this is a C1 neighborhood commercial district. What are some of the uses that are allowed in there? We're not talking about Amazon big box stores. We're talking about personal services, restaurants, tradesman shop, daycare, health club. Those are some of the uses that are there and that are available for this particular area. And in fact, that is part of the vision that the township and its residents have set forth in their Boothwyn Town Center plan. Those are the types of businesses that they hope to attract. And by converting this, that eliminates at least 6 potential units to have that vision come to fulfillment in the future. I also, just a couple of other items, the hair salon indicated, and you heard some testimony about whether they were paying rent and where they were moved. Interestingly enough, the public notice shows a photo of the hair salon, and it says, "We have moved." Not "we were evicted," not "we're going out of business." Just says they've moved. We don't know why. Maybe their rent was too high. Could have been a lot of different issues, but we don't know that, and there was no testimony. There's also some testimony about impact for the residents. This will clearly impact the residents in the area, as there is going to be at least potentially 6 more families or individuals moving into these units, which again is part of the services that the township would provide, including trash collection, whereas commercial would be separate and apart from that, and they would have to get their own. So it is going to have an impact on the township, and I'm not going to go into great detail because there wasn't a lot of testimony about that. I don't know, and I specifically asked questions of Mr. Rufo, what due diligence did he do in order to find out whether this property was going to be, and I assume he wanted it to be profitable. And he indicated he did some, he showed up at the township, didn't indicate that he was provided or asked for a copy of this vision plan. It had clearly been ongoing. There were multiple public hearings, many of which these township officials, including the zoning hearing board, participated in. Interestingly enough, in 2005, had he bothered to look at that, the comprehensive plan shows this particular property as a mixed-use property. That's been since 2005, not 2020, not 2018, 2005. So again, the burden is not on the township to show that. The burden is on the applicant to show that the variance is necessary and that there are undue hardships that would not permit this use to continue. And obviously, there were commercial tenants in there. It's not that they can't get them or that they don't. Yes, there may be some delay in that, but it's clearly has been used for commercial property for many, many years. And the township would like to see it continued in its current status, which is both residential and commercial, so that the township town center concept can be addressed as is planned out. Thank you.
what our solicitor is doing is getting a say, so, or giving him more than 24 hours to write up this decision, because it's going to be a lot of writing up. 24
Mr.
hours.
Chairman, let the record reflect that the applicant was kind enough to give us a waiver of a written decision within 24 hours so that the board can vote on the application this evening, okay? Mr. Chair, how do you wish to vote on the application? Do you wish to do it by a poll, individual
poll.
poll?
Right.
All right, starting with Ms. Andrew, how do you vote?
Denied.
Mr. Marconi?
Moving forward, considering everything that was presented to us tonight, I'm going to vote in accordance with the township plan moving forward that was set up by the planning commission. So I'm going to vote no.
Mr. Mosley, how do you vote?
Denied.
And Mr. Holfelder? Approved. Okay, and Mr. Chair?
Approved.
That's a 3-2. Regretfully, that's a denial for intensity purposes. We'll have a decision rendered within 45 days. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Falcone. Thank you, Mr. Rufo. Thank you, Mr. Pierce.
I'm glad you did.
Jeez, it's a good thing. We have a hung jury.
I just thought that.
Well, that's the way it goes, right? That's the way the cookie crumbles. All right, the next application. Can I? Just going to give them a time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just
Pierce, yeah.
I just have one other thing. The second application, the township just asked me to appear and just indicate that they are not opposed to the application and feel that it would be a great benefit to improve the parking situation down there on that area. They don't wish me to present any evidence or any cross-examination, but I just wanted to let you know that that's what the township.
How do you really feel? Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Yes, sir, of course. They're reciprocal. Someday I may ask you to reciprocate. Mr. Kynette, what a pleasure. How are you? Very well. Welcome to the zoning hearing board. All right, I'm going to read the second application, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Now, it's a long one, so here we go, okay? So this is 31-23, the property located at 4880 Chichester Avenue, Upper Chichester. It's zoned R-2, owned by Randy Farrell, petitioner, South Delco Investments LLC, and it proposes to demolish the existing dwelling and replace with parking as primary use for the dentist office located at 500 Chichester Avenue. Now, the petition of the South Delco Investments LLC for a variance, special exception and appeal or other from the zoning ordinance 678 adopted in 2012. Okay, the following sections are in play. Section 600-70, N, off-street parking is permitted use by right in a 1C. Section 600-140K, parking as a primary use by right is permitted only in the IC district. And 600-222, a non-conforming use or structure may be extended, enlarged, or altered when so authorized by the zoning officer, provided that letter B, the proposed enlargement or extension only occurs on the tract where the nonconformity is currently located. C, the area devoted to the nonconforming use shall not be increased by more than 25%. The nonconforming structure shall not be increased by more than 25% of its cubic content. And letter D, any extension or enlargement of the building shall conform to the area, height, and setback regulations of the district in which it is located. And letter E, not more than one extension or enlargement to a non-conforming use or structure shall be granted. Alternatively, the applicant seeks additional considerations, including but not limited to 600-14G, any accessory use on the same lot with and customarily incidental to any of the uses permitted above and not detrimental to the neighborhood. 600-18 R-2, uses permitted by right. 1600-19 R-2, uses permitted by special exception. 622 area and bulk regulations, section A5, 6, 7, and 8. And finally, 600-159 accessory structures. With that, I ask, is the applicant here this evening?
Yes, Mr.
All right, thank you. Represented by yourself. If you let the record know.
Yes, my name is Kenneth Kynette. I'm here on behalf of the applicant.
Very good, thank you. Would you like to open to the board?
I will do that, just real briefly. I had out our exhibit package. If you all have that. We don't mark this as an exhibit. I'm setting this in administratively, but it is the list and notice letters.
Very good, yes.
We
Thank you, Mr. Kynette.
We had 23, I believe, notice requirements. We got 23 cars back. So once we didn't get 1509 Summers Lane, 5125 Martin Avenue, and 1504.
Thank you, Mr. Kynette. Did you mark them for the record?
I did not mark.
We'll call them applicant one, is that all right, or do you have exhibits?
I'm free.
Pre-numbered, yep, so we'll do it number 8, is that all right? Are those in here already?
They are not.
They're not, so that's number 8 then, how about that? And that's for the green cards, is that right, of notice? Thank you. Can you confirm that the property was posted appropriately?
I cannot.
You cannot. Mr. Romali, could you do that?
Yes.
It was appropriately posted?
Yes.
All right. With that, Mr. Kynette, why don't you tell the board what it is you're trying to do after all of that legalese we read?
Thank you, Mr. Rendamani. Good evening. My name is Ken Kynette. I'm an attorney with an office in media. I'm representing South Delco Investments LLC in connection with the property at 4880 Chichester Avenue. That property is located on the southwest corner of the intersection of Chichester Avenue and Summers Lane. It's in the R2 medium density residential district, and it's currently developed with a dilapidated single-family dwelling. The applicant is the owner of the property on the opposite side, adjoining northwest corner of Chichester Avenue and Summers Lane, known as 5000 Chichester Avenue, which is occupied by Dental Healthcare Associates, which has an overlapping ownership with the applicant. The zoning hearing board in case 8-1 of 2007, which is our exhibit A2, found the dental practice use at 5000 Chichester Avenue to be a lawful nonconforming use and granted a special exception to permit the dental practice to be expanded. January 6th of 2023, we filed an application for a zoning permit under section 600-222 of the Township Zoning Code seeking expansion of a nonconforming use. January 13th, 2023, the application was denied, stating the IC district is the only place a parking lot is permitted as a principal use. The application for the zoning permit and the denial are both included in Exhibit A1. The parking would be the principal use of the property, but we're seeking permission for further expansion of a lawful nonconforming dental practice use in the form of an accessory use. So simply stated, we want to construct a 33 space parking lot at 4880 Chichester Avenue for the exclusive use of the dental practice property at 5000 Chichester Avenue. The dental practice itself would not be expanding to 4880 Chichester Avenue. And to do that, as Mr. Rendamani read, we are seeking relief from Chapter 600, Article 26, nonconforming uses, structures, and lots, and specifically 600-222, which is the enlargement of a nonconforming use. Now, this section allows the zoning officer to approve an expansion subject to compliance with subsections A through E. Subsection A
it provides that it does not materially detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding area. As proposed, we don't believe that it is, and we have not asked for relief from that section. 600-222B is a requirement that the expansion be on the same lot as the non-conforming use. We've requested a variance from this provision, and although the properties are immediately adjacent to one another, they are separated by Summers Lane. 600-222C, expansion of a non-conforming use is limited to 25% of the area devoted to the non-conforming use. We don't or there's a cubic measurement of 25%. We don't think that that was intended for an accessory use serving a non-conforming use, and frankly, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to try to calculate how that would be applied. And we are not extending the non-conforming use from the buildings that it's in currently. So we've asked for a variance to allow that expansion. 600-222D, expansion is required to conform to area height and setback regulations of the district. Again, I don't think that this provision contemplated an accessory parking lot in that limitation. So we've requested a variance from any bulk and area regulations determined to apply to the parking lot use. 600-222E, limitation on expansion of a non-conforming use to a one-time application. We're compliant currently with the parking requirements for the dental practice, but practically speaking, we need more parking than was originally approved with the expansion of the non-conforming use. Some of the other variances I'll just mention quickly. They're sort of duplicate requests. The township code, as you're probably aware, has some sort of nesting provisions that say the uses in R2 are the same uses that are in R1. So the list is a little bit longer, appears a little bit longer than it actually might be. But because we're not entirely sure how to address this, because it will become a principal use of a lot, but we're asking to expand a non-conforming accessory use. We've asked for variances that would get us to that point if the zoning hearing board were to grant those variances. We have identified a couple of other items, and they're identified in Exhibit A7. That was since the filing of our application. It's Section 160-144, capital A.4, paren little a, which requires a 10-foot buffer planting strip around the perimeter of a parking lot. 160-144A7, which requires a fence or a 4-foot high hedge around the perimeter except for access points. And 160-144B4, which requires parking islands every 20 spaces or at the end of each row of parking. Historically, the applicant has addressed the need for additional parking spaces by having employee parking at the Chichester United Wesleyan Church, which is to the northeast across Chichester Avenue. That parking has been limited to employees, and our understanding and one of the primary reasons for our client to put the property under agreement is that our understanding is that the availability of parking on the church may be coming to an end. And even with those spaces over time, there's been an increase in traffic on Chichester Avenue combined with a curve as you approach the church driveway from the south. It's made the use of the parking lot dangerous for employees to park and cross Chichester Avenue to get to work. There's no sidewalks from the church on the west side of Chichester Avenue, and the sidewalk is not continuous all the way along the eastern front. It goes from the church driveway. There is no sidewalk until I believe it's referred to as the MSI sports fields. So it's resulting in people crossing Chichester Avenue rather mid-block. On the other hand, 4880 Chichester Avenue is located directly across Summers Lane from 5000 Chichester Avenue, which would provide safe and convenient employee parking
and access, particularly given that there's also a traffic signal at this intersection. It would alleviate the need to cross Chichester Avenue from parking to get to the dental practice. There are sidewalks already along the frontage of the dental practice along Chichester Avenue, and it would be the least intrusive property for this proposal along Summers Lane. It's consistent with other uses fronting on Chichester Avenue from Quillen Lane down to the Route 322 overpass. This request is also, we feel, consistent with the prior zoning hearing board variance granted to Wawa on Chichester Avenue at Malatesta Avenue. And our exhibit A3 has that decision in there. The main difference, I think, between that situation and our situation is that there is an intervening public way between the two properties. The Wawa case found, the zoning hearing board found in the Wawa case both a common law right and that the shared parking provisions of the township code allowed for the off-street parking of one non-residential use on an adjoining property. Tonight we'll have Dr. Lance Panarello and John Robinson testify on behalf of the application. And just real quickly, I would go through and just identify what I had pre-marked and handed up. Exhibit A1 is our original application. It contains my January 6th letter to the chairman. The application itself, a supplemental zoning appeal application, a single sheet sketch plan prepared by JMR Engineering dated January 5th, 2023, a redacted agreement of sale between the property owner and South Delco Investments LLC, a zoning permit, and the zoning permit denial dated January 13th, 2023. A2, as I mentioned, is the zoning hearing board decision 8-1 2007, dated October 14th, 2007, for the expansion of the non-conforming use at 5000 Chichester Avenue, in which the dental office property was recognized as non-conforming, or the use of that property was recognized as non-conforming. A3 is the Wawa zoning decision dated July 16th, 1998. As I mentioned, that allowed the use of an adjacent property to provide accessory parking to the Wawa as the sole use of that property. A4 is the resume or CV of John Robinson, our engineer. A5 is a revised site plan. A6 is a revised site plan that was overlaid on an aerial photograph of the property. And A7 was the additional zoning relief that we may need for some specific parking lot standards. And unless there's any questions on that, I'm prepared to have Dr. Panarello testify. Dr. Lance Panarello.
Lance Panarello.
Mr. Panarello, what is your relationship to South Delco Investments LLC?
So my business partner, Dr. Grant, and I are the owners of that, and it owns the real estate that our dental office has in. So we're the owners, policy and the business.
And is South Delco Investments LLC the equitable owner of 4880 Chichester Avenue?
For the agreement, yes.
And a redacted agreement of sale for that property was included in the application?
Yes.
That was in A1? A1.
Yes.
And I think you said South Delco Investment also owns 5000 Chichester Avenue?
Correct.
And who occupies that property?
Dental Healthcare Associates, our dental office.
And what is your relationship to Dental Healthcare Associates?
My business partner and I, Jordan Grant, are the owners of that as well, and operators.
So if the board were to approve your application and a parking lot is approved for 4880 Chichester Avenue, would that be for the use of Dental Healthcare Associates?
Yes, it would.
And would it be for the employees of the Dental Healthcare
Yes.
Associates?
Yes.
Where do your clients park?
Clients park in the main parking lot around the building.
Okay, so this parking lot would be exclusively for employees?
As best as I could do, yes. I mean, I can't say that a patient would never park there, but it's designed for them.
And if the board were to agree to your approve your application, would you agree to a condition to that effect that it
Yes.
would be limited to employee parking? What are the current parking facilities available to patients of dental health care?
So the spots around our existing building currently.
So along Chichester Avenue?
Correct.
And
Chai and the Summers, the part that
And that's on the property at 5,000
on the
Chichester
property,
Avenue?
correct.
And is it your understanding that the parking spaces that you provided are compliant with the number required by Township Code when it was approved in 2007?
Yes, they were.
What are dental health care's hours of operation?
So 7 to 8 every day, but Friday 7 to 5 and 2 Saturdays a month currently.
And how many employees does dental health care have?
Upwards of 70.
How many employees are generally at the property at any one time?
Between 20 to 35.
And where are those employees parking?
Some on site and the majority at
And the church is located where?
across the street to the left, one property.
So it's across Chichester Avenue?
Across Chichester Avenue, yes.
And to the north of your property?
Yes.
That parking there is solely for employees?
Yes.
Now, do your employees come to Dental Healthcare Associates at different times?
They do all random hours. We have some people that do 12-hour shifts, some people that do shift. We have a lot of random shifts, and especially in this environment today, the part-time shifts have been super helpful for us because it's allowed us to employ people. You know, right now it's tougher to get people, so being able to have shift people that might only work 18 hours a week provides us with a lot of extra opportunity to keep hours, because that was a problem with COVID, so tremendously.
Now, are there times throughout the day, or the morning or the evening, when these employees are coming to work and it's dark outside?
Yes, and they're black pants, and as you can imagine, if they have a dark jacket on, it's problematic. We've actually bought them clip lights to put on their jackets at times at night to help with the safety.
And those employees that are parking at the church, they have to make their way back down Chichester Avenue and at some point cross Chichester Avenue to get to the Dental Healthcare Associates?
Correct.
Is the employee parking at the church, is that on the same side of the street as the dental office?
It is not. It's across Chichester Avenue.
Ready? So when the employees let me ask you this. Are there sidewalks along the east side of Chichester Avenue, the side that the church is on?
A portion of it. There's a portion that is not.
So can your employees, if they park at the church, can they get down to at least the front of your property on the sidewalks?
No, they have to either walk on the road or walk through the grass to get to the sidewalk. Answer that?
Yes.
Okay.
How about on the opposite side, on the west side of Chichester
There is
Avenue?
not.
Are there
That's-
sidewalks there?
No, there are not.
None at all?
No.
Are there street lights?
I believe so. For a portion of it.
More than just the one that covers the SEPTA, the public
Yeah,
transportation?
none on the other side. There's that one there.
Okay. So when the employees park at the church, they have to either cross Chichester Avenue and walk along the shoulder on the west side, or walk through the grass until they reach the sidewalk, or walk out into the street. East side.
Correct.
Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
And is the where the driveway is located at the church, is there a curve in Chichester Avenue at that point?
No.
still, I had mentioned in my opening remarks that there's a concern that the parking at the church will no longer be available.
Correct. And there possibility of losing their tax-free status of the parking lot because of the way we did something nice for me, and I really hate for it to be a problem.
And was
They did
that
something very nice for us?
And was that one of the reasons that led to your trying to acquire this property in this
Yes.
application? And at the intersection of Chichester Avenue and Summers Lane, is there a traffic light at that intersection?
Yes.
Is there a crosswalk at that intersection?
Yeah, the striping in the road, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, correct, yeah.
And-
a little button to like turn it, I guess if that's what you're asking.
And once someone were to cross from the east side of Chichester Avenue to the west side where your dental practice is located, are there sidewalks along the frontage of 5000 Chichester
There
Avenue
are.
at that point?
Correct.
So if the zoning hearing board were to grant the relief that you're seeking and you were to make a parking lot out of 4880 Chichester Avenue, the folks parking there would have sidewalks once they cross the street.
Correct.
And they would not have to cross Chichester Avenue again.
Correct, and especially now with that being a cul-de-sac is even, it's very fortunate for the neighbors there as well as for us for that same reason. Not a thoroughfare anymore.
Are you aware of any other property available in the vicinity of your property at 5000 Chichester Avenue that could provide this
No, I've
employee
been
parking?
trying for a long time.
And how about along Quillen Lane? Is the portion, the unimproved portion of Quillen Lane next to the 5000 Chichester Avenue, is that available for parking?
It is not, because it's not officially open.
And if it was available for additional parking, would it satisfy the parking needs that you've expressed in the
It
application?
would not even close.
Do you feel that putting a parking lot at 4880 Chichester Avenue would keep people in traffic out front? Keep people in traffic from having to cross Chichester Avenue?
It would really help the safety.
Would it keep them from driving all the way through the neighborhood of Lynn Lane or Martin?
Correct. Right into it.
And if the zoning hearing board were to grant your petition, would you agree to limit parking to dental office employees only?
Sure.
Would you keep it secure in off hours?
Best we could do that, yes.
Crosswalk were required from Summers Lane to 5000 Chichester Avenue. Would you put
Would.
that in if required? That's all I have for Dr. Panarello. Is there anybody that intends to be a party in this matter this evening? And then there'd be no cross-examination.
Okay. Well, I have a couple questions.
Certainly.
You understand that we never had a parking lot, just the Wawa parking lot that you referred to is right next to each other, not separated by a street. Would have less problem if they were right next door. You reverse subdivided this back in 2007. Do you remember your testimony in 2007? Talking about putting the second floor on and you wanted to have a couple additional chairs and the second floor was going to be for storage only.
Initially it was.
But now you have how many chairs? How many dentists do you have in that facility?
9, including orthodontists.
Okay, so you have 9 more.
Not
dentists.
9 more. but
9
9.
total.
Yes,
And you have 53 spaces
correct.
as it was in. I just have a problem with this. I think I'm going to go back and get the minutes and look at the minutes and see how many people you said you were going to bring in. I don't think you were going to bring in that many dentists at that time.
So when we built the building, we were the first one in our consulting group to build a large office of this nature. We were the trailblazers. We didn't have the data, the information. We didn't know how big sterilization needed to be. We had prior knowledge because nobody in our group of 1,000 dentists and the consultant that we worked with had done that, nor had the office designer, who was one of the larger designers in the country. So we knew we had one chance to ask for everything to do it because we couldn't go back. So we did that, not knowing where the future was going to lead us. Now it ended up working out better for us than we expected, for our patients, our team, their families. And I'm glad for that, but it does present its own issues. And the parking one was the number one that hit us as fast as possible. And I have tried and approached my neighbors on multiple occasions to try and do what you suggested. I did. The one neighbor, their father had passed. They ended up moving into the house where they don't want to sell. They live in it. My neighbor's behind me. She loves it there. We've got a great relationship. They use part of our property. We use part of it. Everybody's happy. And the other neighbor, Eileen's been there forever, and she's kind of content doing her thing, and she's happy as well. So there's really, I haven't had the opportunity, and I've dealt with all these people on multiple occasions and multiple fronts to try and do this a simpler way. With that road being closed and this property coming available and somebody actually willing to sell it, I of course did everything I could to do it as fast as I could to make sure this would happen, because every day that they got across the street, it doesn't help. And then when the church thing hit as well, it obviously sped up my situation, because they did me a favor. And if something ever happens and they end up without tax-free stats to their parking lot and I can no longer pay for that, that's going to cost them, and they did me a favor. I don't think that's fair to them at all either. So I worked really hard to get this to this point. We've worked hard to do this, and for the safety of my team. And it's for them.
Now, you just said Summers Lane is closing, or you said there's
With the it's a cul-de-sac now. It does not have access to 322. I don't know if you're aware, but so it's like a cul-de-sac now. So the thorough traffic does not happen there. So it's like a development at this point, which is helpful for us because we're just crossing, it's not a high traffic zone like it was. I mean, for those of you that remember, I ran out multiple times when there was not a light there for all those accidents. It was awful. And it's significantly safer in that area because of the traffic light and what has gone on, and provides us a good opportunity. And I'm judging by the fact that none of the neighbors want to come, I'm guessing they all agree.
question for Mr. Romali real quick. Can Summers Lane, can they take over that portion of Summers Lane, relocate Summers Lane over to the outside of that property? Is there any way that could be moved? Because both properties were together, like he's suggesting. Yeah. Do you know how many houses are back there? Okay, that would be great.
Hey, Charlie, do you know, when they complete 322, they're going to open Summers Lane back up?
If you want to ask a question, go ahead.
So I have a question. Does it make it easier to cross Summers Lane and Chichester Avenue? I'm kidding. I see you guys running across there at night, and I'd be scared myself.
I just have a question. It is going to be a paved parking lot, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, one use. If I changed it,
As far as the aesthetics, the looks, the lighting,
yes.
where does all that, how does that all get approved so that the lot does fall into, if it is okayed, as far as the egress that kind of stuff, access?
So I can speak to the lighting and the landscaping and stuff because I dealt with that very heavily with my property because there's a lot of problems because. So I had originally had like 1 foot tall flowers. I asked them to not make me put trees along Chi Avenue because I thought it would be a vision problem. He did agree. I had 10 inches of flowers in between the sidewalk and the curb. After like 3 weeks, they came and said, can you please remove them? It's a site problem. And they were literally 10 inches high. So we worked really hard to make it as minimal. The biggest thing that I petitioned and was allowed was to keep the lighting minimal so that that's not like blinding every neighbor. And never had a call about it, never had an issue. And I think we did a really good job of making that as subtle as we could, but still be safe and functional and all that good stuff. I worked really hard because I didn't want all those calls with the lights and all that, whatever. And the landscaping we did was minimal. Boxwoods, I'm trying to think of more for this place versus the other because they grow a little better and they're like a little more of a better edge and they don't look. We tried to do a green thing and it was very natural. The look is okay. I'd
Yeah.
rather a little cleaner cut.
And how about entering and exiting the parking lot? Is that going to be done on Summers Lane or is that going to be done off of Chichester Avenue
So
or
I'm
both?
guessing we're gonna do that with land development, and figure that ins and outs and what PennDOT allows. But
Yeah, because Chichester Avenue, I think, is a PennDOT road.
Yeah.
So you would have to, so if you were going to enter or exit Chichester Avenue,
You gotta get it approved by
you
that.
got to go through PennDOT.
Correct. My guess is-
Summers Lane, I would imagine, would just be an in and an out, and that would
And
go
the other
through
would
the
be an
township.
out, would be my guess.
Right.
You know, enough doing all of what we designed it on, and I'm sure the engineer can speak to that.
Right.
I think PennDOT's gonna dictate that.
We do have the engineer to testify to that, but essentially there's a horseshoe-shaped driveway that has 2 access points to Chichester Avenue and one that goes out on the Summers. And the proposal is the one access on the Chichester Avenue, which is closest, it's almost at the intersection itself, that would be closed off. And the one furthest away would remain, as would the one for Summers. And to sort of step back and answer a question you had asked a little bit earlier, this is sort of the first step in the process. If the zoning hearing board approves this, we'll have to take this through land development as well.
But the lighting and all and landscapes could be concerned. It's the last thing, and I don't, I've been there a long time and haven't had that issue.
Remove property and you put something in its place, you kind of want to upgrade that, the look of it
Mm-hmm.
to the best you can for a parking lot.
It'll be clean.
I'm sure. Thank you.
Real quick, we're going to continue this till next month for additional testimony and for emergency so we can get out of here. Okay, thank you. We're going to continue this till next month. It'll be
That's spring break for me.